Alongside David Pagnotta and Shane Kelly, I'm Irfaan Gaffar. We call this segment Dirty Data here on the fourth period. And gentlemen, let's take a dive into, yes, the Toronto Maple Leafs. David, I'll flat out ask you, is this team legit?
Well, they check a lot of boxes, Irf. They certainly do. I mean, they're legit right now. Are they going to be legit once game 83 and on comes? I mean, based on their track record, that's a big issue. But they know they're likely facing the Tampa Bay Lightning. You're looking at probably another 7-game series in the first round. Then they'll figure out Boston later if they can get that far. But you look at this team now, before we get too ahead of ourselves, and yeah, they're good offensively. They're great on the forecheck. Goaltending has been solid. And their defense, I think, has been better than a lot of people anticipated, myself included, especially when Jake Muzzin went out of action. When they lost Morgan Rielly for a stretch, they've got guys that have been able to step up with Timothy Liljegren, with Rasmus Sandin. Justin Hall has not been the punchline as often this season as he has in previous years. I mean, they're holding the fort down. Again, this comes down to how this team is going to perform come playoff time. But right now, they're checking boxes, certainly. They're likely to add ahead of the trade deadline, and probably more so up front than on the back end, unless they find something that just kind of falls into their laps. But this team, Shane, and you can talk more about this, they look like a team that is poised to prove a lot of people wrong come playoff time.
Yeah, I feel kind of bad for this group. I mean, they do get maligned a lot about their playoff performance, but last year they get the eventual Stanley Cup finalists in the first round, and they dominate them in several of the games, and it goes to 7. This year, Boston is having a maybe all-time top 5, top 10 season by a group in the regular season, and this is in the cap era. You know, this is really impressive. So no matter, it doesn't seem like they can catch a break, right? There's just always that one team that's ever so slightly better than them. But I actually love this group overall. Spread positivity. It's contagious. They do so many things really, really well. You talked about the forecheck. They're top 10 in the NHL in forcing shots off of their forecheck. They're top 10 in the NHL in transitioning the puck with control into the opponent's zone. They're top 10 in the NHL in terms of stretch passes. So they do a lot of things that really accentuate the talent that they have. And on the back end, they've gotten, I think, really lucky with Samsonov turning into kind of one of the top 10 to 15 goalies in the NHL based on goals saved above expected. It's interesting. Both our internal models and the public models are kind of all over the place on him, but they all agree he's really good. It's just some have him as almost a Vezina candidate, and others are kind of like, oh, he's better than average. And Murray has kind of become what I thought he would at the start of the season, so they got lucky there. I don't know where you really add with these guys.
I would like to see the model that shows that Ilya Samsonov, or Samsonov, depending how you want to pronounce it, is considered a Vezina candidate. But I will say that.
MoneyPuck.com.
Okay, well, Money Puck, I'm going to take a look at this after this segment. Look, I see these guys on a regular basis. Some games, I'll be totally honest with you guys, at home, they're a very boring team to watch at home until they decide to kind of just turn it up a little notch, and all of a sudden they get to roll, which is what they did earlier this week against the New York Islanders. That first period was abysmal, and then all of a sudden they were able to turn it on for the final 40 minutes of that game. Come playoff time, I'm not sure if that's going to be sustainable, if you can get away with not coming out strong to start a game. But again, we're going to have to see what Kyle Dubas and his staff try to do before the deadline to kind of change that rhythm and change that flow, especially when you're trying to start off by setting the tone in a game.
Shane, is this team good enough to have league average goaltending and be able to go on a run in the playoffs? Are they good enough in front of them to be able to just get that kind of average goaltending? Guys maybe don't need to be, like you mentioned Vezina candidates, but they don't need to be Vezina caliber goalies in order to have success in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so. The defense has been maligned for years as kind of soft, not a lot of size. And that's still true. So they actually do struggle at defending their own blue line. They're bottom 10 in the league in terms of opponent carrying the puck in on them. Some of that has to do with their systems, but we don't need to get into all that. But the thing that they do really, really well as a defensive group is transition the puck out themselves. One of the easiest ways to create offense, especially if you're not a very skilled team, is to turn the opponent over in their zone, because it leads to a lot of odd man rushes down low. something like 40% of goals are scored off some form of a turnover or a forecheck, where you get a down low man advantage. They don't give up a lot of that because their defensemen are really secure with the puck. So yeah, they might get they might get attacked at the blue line a lot, which can cause problems. But when you're only getting one shot, it's hard to generate a lot of offense. So I think they can survive with average goaltending.
Yeah, and looking at this team, again, a lot of it's going to come down to how they can modify the offense come playoff time. But speaking with how they're performing now, they've got a really good system in place with respect to how their lines are matching up, at least the top six, because you've got your first line with Bunting, Matthews, and Marner. And Nylander has really stepped up this season with John Tavares. And right now they've got Yarncrook on the left side. I'm curious to see how that's going to keep going. And Kerfoot's kind of been dropped down the ranks. But Tavares and Nylander specifically have really been meshing well off each other. And that's going to be good news for this team moving forward, especially come playoff time, to have those guys connecting. It's not necessarily Tavares needing Marner to get him going. Nylander has been able to step up so far this year.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for this. That was Dirty Data, courtesy of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It'll be really interesting to see what version of the Toronto Maple Leafs we will get come playoff time.